Good morning. We're back live on Senate Agriculture. We're having lengthy discussions about, well, I would say, probably all aspects of cannabis, and we're going to continue that conversation with Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition and Land Access and Opportunity Board. Jeffrey Pizzotillo?
Yes, Pizzotillo.
Okay. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Jeffrey Pizzotillo, co-founder and executive director of Vermont Growers Association. And we are also a founding member organization of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition as well. I just want to say good morning. Thank you for your time and congratulations on your appointments to this session. I hope you guys have a formative session as a committee, both the chair, vice chair, and members as well. So I'm just going to be brief. We have somewhat of a roster behind us. I'm going to largely do introductions about myself, our organization, the coalition, and then overview our coalition's priorities. And I'm going to pass it off to our coalition members to dive a little bit deeper and unpack the issues. So I'm just going to go through and just
appreciate that. And just kind of in your outline, if you could, so that we don't have to flesh it out a little bit later and kind of know just what you do kind of as your board.
Sure.
And I'm sure you're going to do that. But
sure. Thank you, Chair. Please. And up front, I just want to say that the Cannabis Equity Coalition is an informal coalition of member-based nonprofits. We are distinct from the Land Access and Oversight Board. They have participated in working groups with the agency last year, which we'll unpack, and I think the agency touched upon as well. So I guess to start a little bit about myself and Vermont Growers Association, just very briefly. So Vermont Growers Association formed in March of 2019. We are a 501c4 member-based nonprofit, so we have growers in our name. Our members do represent the entire supply chain. We have just about 100 members now. I do believe we are probably the oldest and the largest representative member-based nonprofit in the cannabis sector. I myself am a cultivator. Our organization consists of those in the industry, licensees and ancillary businesses alike, really trying to come together. Vermont is a small state and not have sort of siloed interests that we see in other larger states when it comes to the cannabis sector. We believe that's where viability and equity and really the ultimate success of the market will come from. And we believe that's been demonstrated by our work so far. Some of the things that Vermont Growers Association has done over the years for the industry is we've done educational workshops. We have stood up a grant, which is basically an emergency fund, as we may know, because of the federal designation or lack thereof. Our cannabis licensees are not eligible for a lot of the emergency relief that other businesses are fortunately eligible to obtain. So we stepped in as a nonprofit to try to provide that service. We are proud that last year we had 11 grantees and awarded over $30,000. So we're proud of that work. In addition to advocacy and general organizing, one of the things that we did with our coalition members is stand up the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition. That is comprised of NOFA Vermont, Rural Vermont, Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, Green Mountain Patients Alliance. And we believe that that grouping of member-based organizations and the communities collectively that we serve is also, this is important to us, representative of the local communities that are most impacted by these markets, and whether it's the adult use market or the medical market as well. I want to highlight that, understanding this is Agricultural Committee, Green Mountain Patients Alliance, which is a member org of ours, focuses on the medical program. That's an important aspect of this conversation as well, even if that doesn't take place in this committee. So that being said, I want to step through some of the priorities of our coalition. I'll be brief. I'm just going to go through and list them so we have a general awareness. And again, my colleagues are going to unpack them a little bit more. Thank you, Linda. Some brief context. And I appreciate the chair and the CCB providing a brief overview of the market. I want to provide a little bit of a perspective on where the market is as well as we go through these priorities. We're coming up on 3 years of an adult use regulated market. And it's very much where we're at right now is very much, there's some great numbers that are coming out of the performance of this market, jobs, revenue. In April of 2023, the cannabis excise tax surpassed the revenues of the alcohol excise tax. Significant numbers. That being said, we are approaching a moment in this regulated marketplace where, first of all, you had asked, Chair, about sort of what our shop owners are looking at, what are they dealing with, their immediate challenges. I just want to take a moment to speak to that.
We want to hear that.
Very much what I would consider is there are increased hardships that are emerging in the regulated market here in Vermont that we see in other states. And we would like to do what we can, hopefully with your help, to avoid going down those roads. And some of those roads are volatility in pricing, market consolidation, lack of technical and financial support for this unique marketplace. Why is that important? Very briefly, no other sector gets hit with the fees and the financial burden that cannabis licensees get hit with, let alone needing access to land and capital just to get to the marketplace. One of the charges of the enabling statute for our market here in Vermont was to transition the legacy community. We have a robust legacy community in the state. We have not finished doing that. I would also add, just for your consideration, if we don't transition customers as well, right, who are frequenting the legacy market, then we ultimately don't have the successful market as well. So some of the structural changes, some of the structural issues that are before, and hardships that are before licensees, are things like the issue of retail opt-in. So that's creating effectively a bottleneck for product to flow through our market. Right now, I believe about 80 localities out of Vermont's 247 has opted into retail sales. So imagine.
I want to jump in on something that you said.
Please do.
So what I would be I guess what I'd be interested in is that you knew what you were getting into when you got into it. Has the regulations changed that much since you've gotten into it to make it a hardship?
That's a good question. And I think it's a complicated response. I think partially, yes, but also there were unforeseen costs and expenses that I think even the board couldn't foresee. For instance, there was an annual gross cap for the tier one manufacturer. I believe it was $10,000. That annual gross cap, I think, was established in good faith, but the board could not foresee, I think, the expenses of the reality of standing up that industry and having a viable industry. And so the legislature came back and revisited that annual gross cap. So that's just an example of not necessarily being able to project some of the hardships that this unique market, because the dynamics with the federal government create. So things like bottlenecking of the industry are really important. That hits hard on retailers and small producers, especially if they're not able to bring their product to market. It does not matter how much technical and financial assistance these licensees have, especially our small producers. If the market structure is effectively not in their favor, we're not going to have the market that speaks to everyday Vermonters. I just want to impart on you that licensees are feeling these hardships now. We are seeing licensees go out of business, especially small producers, and at the same time, we still need to do a better job of onboarding those from our legacy industry. So I'm going to stop there. Hopefully we have more time later to unpack these as a committee. Yep. So turning to our priorities, you'll see that representatives of some of the issues that we just talked about, equity funding, that's both community and industry reinvestment. The second point is direct market for our small producers, and I want to emphasize for our small producers, that is essential, and I look forward to having that conversation. Agricultural use. Vermont is one of the few states, there's about 3 states now in the country that have some sort of agricultural designation for the cannabis market. Vermont is one of them. New York State's the other, Oregon is another. So that is a moment of progress that received some challenge last year that we hope to have a conversation around to sort of course correct. The fourth item is restorative justice. The fifth item is public consumption. We are the least friendly consumption state when it comes to cannabis, and I think I'd like to put on your shoulders to not think about just tourists as well, but also Vermonters when it comes to that.
Tell us about consumption, because I think everybody has I would think the general public would say, well, it's legal. So what is legal?
Exactly, and nothing's legal for consumption right now, unless you're basically a homeowner. It is very limited. And I would mind you, we are sandwiched between 2 large land areas. Canada and New York State have public consumption. So we often hear those conversations.
Private venue, got a band, they're charging admission to come in, legal?
That is not legal.
Okay.
Yep.
So anywhere that you have a gathering of people, and then it says, okay, well, you're over 100 people, we gotta hire a law enforcement officer because of the crowd control and all of that. No matter whether it was on private property or not, and you were just forced to hire somebody because of the laws, it still would not be legal.
You would not be able to have a public event. That would have to, you could keep it private and not advertise and, friends and family, I think, under the confines of your own home. But you cannot have a public event when it comes to that.
Helpful.
And I would just add, really the priority for us would be non-homeowners in the state should have the same dignity that homeowners have when it comes to consumption and growing. So that being said, just to round out our priorities, because I want to allow time for others, we ask that we increase the home grow allowance. We think home grow is essential to the vitality of an industry. And then lastly, a medical priority, which you'll see, or other committees will see from the CCB's legislative report around repositioning the eligibility and conditions list of the medical program into the CCB, in addition to the other priorities of the Green Mountain Patients Alliance. So I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Graham.
Welcome back, Graham. How are you?
Not bad. How are you all doing?
Good.
I know.
Well,
Well, you already heard a little from me on this, but thank you again for having me. It's Graham Eubanks, Streetford, rural Vermont. You all heard from me earlier about organizations, so I'm gonna get straight to this.
Yeah.
As you all know, we're members of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, and as you, I guess, gathered, we all are membership-based organizations with different scopes of practice, and ours is mostly in the agricultural realm. So what I'm going to speak to today is sort of the context of our agricultural advocacy and a little about this direct marketing stuff. So for rural Vermont, we began work on hemp in 2008, as you all saw on our slides the other day. Hemp is regulated as agriculture now at the USDA level, as Pepper said earlier. It has been rural Vermont's position since pre-adult use registration that if adult use cannabis is going to be regulated, among other things, it needs to be accessible for farmers and community members to participate and succeed in this economy. Nationwide, both adult use cannabis production and traditional farming are extremely economically marginalized. And we always saw this as an opportunity for Vermont farmers and aspiring farmers to potentially have actually a product which they could participate in making some money on. Federal law says that we can't regulate cannabis as ag in Vermont, as you've heard. Vermont law, however, also says in Act 158 and S 188, 2022, that as soon as federal law changes, we will begin to regulate it as agriculture in Vermont through the Agency of Agriculture. So we have this trajectory already acknowledged in our law. We know that farmers cannot grow adult use cannabis on land with Vermont Land Trust, as was mentioned earlier, or land under contract with NRCS, or the access of which is funded by federal programs, and that land is generally very hard to afford. This conversation we've been having over a number of days. We also know that there are high costs of basic administration, which folks have talked about as well, from banking to insurance to regulatory compliance. These are significant barriers of entry and just maintaining a business for folks. So we're not here saying that cannabis and tomatoes are the same thing or should be regulated in the same way. I think it's important to bring that up. But we are saying that their cultivation, how the land is grown on, and how the farmers themselves are treated is appropriate to regulate in a very similar way. And some of the critical differences include many of the security and site requirements for cultivators, which are tiered in their intensity and based on the scale of cultivation, and those are articulated by the CCB in the rulemaking. So everybody has to have these particular site requirements, which from the get-go makes them regulated very differently from agriculture as well. Some important legislative and executive branch intentions to keep in mind that were mentioned is that this should be accessible for small farmers. We should bring the legacy or illicit market into regulated market. And I think this aspect of agricultural status is really critical for both of these intentions. So we've worked with members of the House Ag Committee and members of this committee to advance our own language and bills in the past. And we've worked with this committee and Senator Starr 2 years ago to enumerate a number of aspects of ag status. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that history. So Act number 158, S188, an act relating to regulating licensed small cannabis cultivation as farming. This allowed the smallest tier of outdoor cultivation license. And I thought that the CCB might have to give you these tiers. I imagine that might be a knowledge maybe helpful for you all to have. But so you all know that the tier 1 outdoor grower is 1,000 square feet or 125 plants. So we're talking about a relatively small area of cultivation. And this law said that it shall be regulated in the same manner as farming and not as development on the tract of land where cultivation occurs. And that includes access to current use at the time if it was already enrolled, exemptions from municipal bylaw, Act 250 and similar development laws, an exemption from the retail tax for farm-related items. Act 270 in 2023, so this is the next year, extended the benefits that have been available to small cultivators to all outdoor cultivators, and it allowed such cultivators to enroll in the use value appraisal program or current use, regardless of whether the land was previously enrolled, and entitled such cultivators to a rebuttable presumption. The cultivation does not constitute a nuisance under law in the same manner as agricultural activities. So that's sort of the right to farm laws, as you often may hear them referred to. Now, 2024, last year, this is where we started to see a little checking of that movement in agricultural status direction. What began as a separate bill, H549, aimed at eliminating all outdoor cultivation in areas on a particular density or in public water or sewage. And that ultimately shifted into H612. And that created an allowance for preferred cultivation districts by municipalities and minimum and maximum setbacks that are established. So this bill, from our perspective, in the entirety of the debate, centered on one particular operator in a conflict in Essex Junction. And y'all may have read about this in the paper. This person has a small duck farm, a small cannabis operation. There wasn't any mediation attempted. And what we've seen alternatively are lawsuits and legislation. Those lawsuits are ongoing, both around the cannabis cultivation, but also around the ducks farming. This legislation will ultimately affect many more licensed cultivators than this individual, as the CCB acknowledged, and the livelihoods they've invested in or would like to, in which it will not resolve the issues that it claims to address either, as we mentioned with smell and setbacks and these general challenges in the previous conversation. And I just want to acknowledge too that this isn't to say that aren't people who feel adversely affected by their proximity to cannabis or other agricultural operations, as we all talked about. Rather, it just remains this case in Essex is really the only one that was brought to the fore throughout this whole time. So it's sort of like what this law was built on. The data from municipalities in response to the CCB survey, and I thought the CCB would go through some of their outdoor setting working groups, so I'll maybe keep the conversation on that less than I anticipated. But when they do come back, maybe I can follow up with you all as well. But they surveyed municipalities in their work on that study. And the data sort of reflects this more broadly, that this is rarely an issue, and I'll get into that in a minute. But the question arises, what threshold of harm or nuisance and what pervasiveness of harm or nuisance, must there be to demand a dramatically shifted regulatory response that will affect people? It's our position that this law is inappropriate as it stands now, and it's best for Vermont to return to regulating outdoor cultivation in the same manner as agriculture related to municipal oversight. I did make time to visit this site as well in the middle of the harvest season this last year. I thought that would be important. We talk about these things in a theoretical manner, but it's important to go, and I'm sure you may have visited your constituent as well, Senator. And I just invite you all, I think a lot of these people are open to being visited and their situations being checked out. This brings us to the working group. I'll spend just a brief time because I want to be able to get other folks, but this outdoor siting working group. So I mentioned the data in the survey with municipalities, and approximately 90% of municipalities indicated no issues with outdoor cultivators, and only 2% of the respondents said they had any significant issues with outdoor cultivators. So this leads us to see little evidence that outdoor cultivators are having much of a negative impact on municipalities at all. We also didn't get anything in the report around the positive impacts, beneficial economic impacts, et cetera, that were briefly discussed here. Additionally, from our perspective, this law has not made it easier for municipalities and cultivators to understand how to regulate and how they're regulated. If anything, it's made it far more difficult and will result in a patchwork of different regulatory approaches around the state that people are having to deal with. Testimony from a municipality in Williston, who was about an expert witness invited into the working group, spoke to how easy it is to understand how to regulate outdoor cultivation when it was seen as ag. And also furthermore, his appreciation for the agency of ag in these situations where he can just say, I don't have to deal with this. This is an agency of ag regulated business. That's fantastic. And Ben Varadi, a lawyer at Vermont Law School who's expert in cannabis law, also testified that there's no evidence that proximity to cannabis producers affects property values either. And I think that might be an important thing for you all to understand as well. A second aspect of this report asked to summarize the impact of establishing various setting requirements to existing licensed outdoor cultivators. That was spoken to a little bit. There's at least 11 businesses that will currently functionally be not allowed to exist anymore, based on the mapping that the CCB did, and I believe that was through GPS. So there's still some unknown about what other businesses may or may not be affected. based on where they're growing, as opposed to just looking at maps. And this also doesn't talk about the potential future cultivators to consider and how a law like this affects the accessibility and affordability of participating as a regulated outdoor cultivator. Because these tiers of outdoor production, as was said, are the most accessible tiers, accessible way to get into this industry. You know, from our perspective, it's unreasonable for the cultivators who are about to be put out of business based on these setbacks alone to face this economic hardship based on the impact assessment on municipalities. Beyond these businesses we don't know about yet, we have been hearing about outdoor cultivators facing municipal overreach for many years and see ample reason to provide these cultivators with the same status agriculture does in relationship to municipal oversight. We have a situation right now, actually, where an outdoor cultivator in the Northeast Kingdom has been told that their high tunnels don't count as part of their outdoor operation, and they want to regulate those as development.
Say that again, the what count?
They're high tunnels, these are greenhouses.
Okay, yeah.
And on any other farm, this wouldn't be a question.
Right.
But it's just the opportunity, you know, for municipalities to identify it and to seek a different path forward. People have the land they have to produce on. You know, whatever it is you're farming. Accessing appropriate land for expanding a farm or starting a farm is not easy. It's more difficult when it's uniquely regulated as cannabis is, cutting off many avenues for supporting access. Agriculture doesn't just happen in areas traditionally defined as rural either. And even these areas, cultivators will be affected by these setbacks regardless of relevance to their particular community. These are maximum and minimum setbacks. It's just, so you're sort of fitting within a window. I'd also like to say that the testimony from Williston, I asked him about the different setbacks and the scale of them. And he said that there's different setbacks for different types of development. But he said rarely are there greater setbacks than 10 to 15 feet on the side and rear of yards in general, and even closer with features like berms or hedges. And the setbacks discussed here, I believe, are 25 and 50 feet in preferred and non-preferred cultivation districts. So we're talking about far more substantial required setbacks that are under law right now for these cultivators than are, you know, standard for other types of commercial development. And we also know those setbacks aren't effective as it is, as we discussed. Another task was to address whether and how to authorize municipalities to establish local cultivation districts. As you might imagine, we don't feel that municipalities should be authorized to have these cultivation districts, and that outdoor cultivation should be regulated as agriculture and be related to in terms of municipal oversight. We do feel that the CCB has overemphasized the degree to which municipalities have asked for additional oversight. And I know they didn't go through the report today, but if you read the report, you'll see a section about this. As I said, only one municipality has indicated they will, and 90% of municipalities indicated no, will set up cultivation districts. That means only one of them is actually thinking about doing this thing that they're now empowered to do. And 90% of municipalities, as I said, indicated no issues with outdoor cultivators, and only 2% had serious issues. So we just don't see how the data justifies the response at this point. And it may be the case that some municipalities want more control over outdoor cannabis siting. We know it's also the case that some municipalities want more control over agriculture. And from our perspective, you know, both of those things are resolved at the legal level or have been for a long time. We think that the Agency of Agriculture, their discretion over agriculture, and considering agricultural status in relationship to municipal oversight for cannabis makes a lot more sense than providing more powers to municipalities to regulate these things. The last question was addressed whether and how outdoor cultivation should be entitled to the rebuttable presumption. This is the right to farm, and again, yes, we feel that they should continue to have this right. This crop is nearly identical to an agricultural crop, hemp. As it was said before, if you had two fields next to each other and someone wanted to file a nuisance complaint or regulate the adult use cannabis field because of smell, there's no functional way of discerning the smell. And as we talked about before, there's all types of smells that are out there, and Julie mentioned the objective measurers of smell, and just the reality that people have really different responses to different smells. The one change we might suggest is some sort of mediation offering in the event of conflict in an effort to mitigate and resolve difficulties before further action is taken. And this is often done in the farm context, but it would certainly go a long ways to, you know, making sure the disputes don't go immediately towards litigation or immediately go towards, fighting the rebuttable presumption. And the last thing I want to do is just mention our advocacy for direct markets for producers, because there's been some discussion around, you know, what can we do for people who are struggling? And I think one of the main points, takeaways I want to have, because I was sort of surprised that the CCB didn't bring this up actually, because I know they have cultivator working groups, they have social equity working groups, and I know this has been a significant topic amongst all of these folks. And it's been one of the primary asks of these communities. these people and businesses cannot afford to only be allowed to sell wholesale. They do not want to be retailers selling other people's products. So people have told me before, well, just have them get a retail license. They don't want to sell other people's products. They don't want to be in that business. They want to sell their own products to people directly. And it's very different from having a retail license with scale, scope, risk, affordability. People want to be able to have wholesale and direct sale aspects of their businesses, just like most small farms. And a number of farmers, we sell this, we grow this crop specifically for these wholesalers. They want this. They'll pay me for it well. I have these other crops I grow for these particular local communities. I have for people who want this, they'll pay a higher price. It allows you to really create like some dependability. If you have a wholesale account, that's going to be a big bulk amount you're going to get every year to a certain buyer for a certain amount. You have smaller local accounts, which you might get a higher return price for. So it allows you to diversify your business offerings. People want to be able to, it's entirely reasonable to articulate scale appropriate regulations for point of sales for producers and to build that out collaboratively with the Cannabis Control Board. And just so you know, we do have language developed from past bills, and we continue to draft more detailed processes that could be established and articulated around that point of sales. If people are interested, we have had bills the last couple of years, which reflect some of this language. And currently our group does not have anyone taking up a bill around direct marketing, but that is part of, our conversation with you all. And lastly, I think I appreciate your questions and support. I'm happy to bring stakeholders in to speak directly to their experiences. If you want to hear from people about like those struggles directly and some of their thoughts on it. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to, is it Jessie Lynn? Jessie Lynn, are you still on the line?
She is.
I'll turn it over to Jessie Lynn Dolan, who represents the Green Mountain Patients Alliance. Maybe introduce herself, and then we're going to go to the land access, to Mark Hughes at the Racial Justice Alliance. I'll step down.
I'm going to just make a comment, as we get ready for that, and really kind of to the committee. I think committee that we're going to see as we move forward, a lot of interest, as the farm bill comes forward, as folks, groups, as what we have before us now. It's going to get into, smells and impact and what is the proper amount of time, if any, can somebody come in and have an organization and not have to address, where it's going to be, as what we're finding now is that, a new industry, one of the questions that I'd asked you, Jeffrey, is, did you know this going in? Well, it's kind of just a question to allow you to get some testimony out on the screen as to, sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you get there. But I think as we're going to move forward, as the right to farm bill comes, and again, as organizations like this, it's going to be something that we're going to have to try to craft a thought process of what is going to be allowed, what's not going to be allowed. And so we're going to see this again over and over.
Sure.
Jessie Lynn.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today, and appreciate you allowing me to join via Zoom. I'm just coming off 3 13-hour shifts in a row from nursing, so thank you. My name is Jessie Lynn Dolan. I'm a registered nurse, mother, cannabis patient, and cannabis caregiver for my son. I'm the former president of the American Nurses Association, Vermont's chapter, just stepping down after 4 long years through COVID. I'm currently on the Vermont Forensic Nursing Board. I'm the former director at the American Cannabis Nurses Association, as well as having founded the Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association in 2017 to help educate patients, consumers, and healthcare providers. I'm co-founder of the Green Mountain Patients Alliance, or GMPA, which is part of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition here today. As a nurse, my experience spans labor and delivery and newborn care, co-founding the UVM Volunteer Labor Doula Program. I worked with high-risk adolescents with behavioral challenges and developmental differences, co-occurring substance use and mental health comorbidities in adolescents, adults in pregnancy, including newborn detox and stabilization. I worked at UVM Behavioral Sciences Research Department for opioids and cannabis, medicated assistant therapy within the Vermont Blueprint Model of Care, as well as chronic pain and case management. I currently work as a home health community wellness nurse with the aging, high-risk, low-income population, the same population ranking #1 in cannabis purchasing since legalization. I'm a cannabis patient myself for chronic pain and PTSD. Becoming a cannabis patient as a nurse was not an easy decision. I have a team of over 12 healthcare providers that work with me to keep me able to work and parent, all who have worked with me to try other pharmaceuticals and approaches, and all who agree cannabis is my best option at the time. I'm a childhood survivor of a motor vehicle accident perpetrated by a drunk driver, having had over 40 surgeries to date, equating to chronic and debilitating pain at times. Cannabis for me replaces a minimum of 6 pharmaceutical prescriptions without the comparable side effects or addictive properties. I only share my story when I feel it's helpful for listeners to understand medicinal cannabis and look within themselves and their own stigmas and biases, which I too have had and needed help and support working through. I will share that today is 28 years in recovery for myself with 0 relapses. So I understand this work wholeheartedly. GMPA does as well, and they support people with education and advocacy while breaking stigmas, all to change and better the medical program for those in need. GMPA advocates for equitable access to affordable, high-quality cannabis for medicinal use. Access is vital to an equitable medicinal cannabis market. We look to decentralize the current market and introduce new ways for Vermonters to participate as a foundation to improving accessibility and viability. Affordable cannabis is essential to a healthy community and a just medical cannabis market. Laws and regulations must reflect the unique interests of patients and caregivers and the importance of affordable, clean, and safe medicine. Vermont's medical cannabis market has reflected the interest of the 3 out-of-state and out-of-country medical dispensaries, holding companies, shareholders for far too long and without commitment to Vermonters, as seen by the recent closing of Ceres Medical Dispensary due to Slang's bankruptcy. This makes it all the more crucial for Vermont to pursue a patient and caregiver-centered policy agenda and program to help focus the market onto the individuals it is intended to help. With the start of the adult use market, the medical dispensary closure was apparent and imminent. We are saddened that it has taken almost 2.5 years into the adult use market for the medical program to be prioritized as compared to the adult use market with financial and tax incentives and gains for the state. Knowing this expected closure would be detrimental to patients. We're a bit disappointed at the lack of education and hope to help change this both for the adult use consumer safety and for our most deserving and vulnerable patients. I was one of the several cannabis educators for the CCB from the beginning of the program until the end of 2024, and do have some concerns at the lack of knowledge amongst our adult use retailers, staff, as well as the lack of prioritization of education since the program inception. Since inception until April of 2024, I offered a free to consumers cannabis nurse hotline offering one-on-one education and support unlike any other level of support and education available. The hotline closed due to a more recent CCB policy not allowing any medical professionals to work in, possibly with, adult use retailers. We hope to see this addressed as July will come quickly when adult use retailers will be allowed to serve medical patients, yet need more knowledge and support to be able to do so well and safely. GMPA supports the CCB's medical report recommendations to move the administration of eligible conditions and oversight under the CCB. We also hope to see the development of a price management system that maintains all medical cannabis transactions to a standard wholesale pricing structure based upon percentage of the value of products in the adult use market. We have many other recommendations and policy points we would love to discuss when the time is available, including reestablishing a medical cannabis oversight advisory panel under the CCB, as we had prior to the adult use program, to help administer and manage the symptom and conditions list for program eligibility, as well as other aspects. We have a medical cannabis program that has no medical professionals involved, and right now has no way of allowing patients and caregivers to have voices or be part. With the largest medical dispensary now closed, we continue to advocate for allowing caregivers to care for 3 patients and patients to have 3 caregivers. These are just a few of the recommendations we hope to go over this session. We're excited to work together and improve the medical program, which is far overdue for a makeover. GMPA supports the policy positions and recommendations of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition. We see the importance and need to expand our ag-related policies specific to outdoor cultivators, as Graham spoke to, and ask to remove the cultivation districts and setbacks in Act 166. We cannot say enough about the importance of direct market access to the patient and caregiver community. This is the absolute best way for patients and caregivers to not only support local, shop local, but actually afford cannabis instead of the much cheaper opioid and other pharmaceutical prescriptions they have available. Financially, we ask you to direct $1 million of the cannabis excise tax revenue to the Cannabis Business Development Fund and for financial and technical assistance for the industry, as well as the request to direct 25% of the cannabis excise tax revenue to the Land Access and Opportunity Board, which you'll hear more from today. Just like the medical program is overdue for a makeover, it's far overdue for Vermont to complete expungement of any and all cannabis-related charges and not recriminalize. We also understand patients as well as medical consumers who, for one understandable reason or another, may choose not to be on the medical cannabis registry. We all need to have access to safe public consumption anywhere lit tobacco is allowed. Our most vulnerable patients may not be homeowners, but they need to legally consume their medicine without risk of legal repercussions or safety concerns that can come with it. When time allows, I would love to discuss in depth the plant counts for cultivation to help you understand from a statistical mathematics side why higher plant counts are desperately needed for medicinal cannabis consumers. I appreciate your time today. I know we only have a short period of time, so I welcome questions or to connect at another time and hope to see you again. The American Nurse Association of Vermont will be at the State House on February 11th to host breakfast and coffee for you all and invite you to come say hello. So thank you today for my time.
Thank you, Jessie Lynn. Jessie Lynn, don't take any, we're probably gonna move on because we wanna get some more people in here. We're gonna have some questions, and I think I know we're gonna have you guys back, so please don't take anything for it that we're not asking you questions. We just wanna get everybody in. We've got about 8 more minutes before we have to go. So thank you for your testimony and noted.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Reverend Mark Hughes. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, and I'm also the co-chair of the Health Equity Advisory Commission at the statewide level. I'm a retired Army warrant officer, so I'm on the command of the Veterans of Foreign Wars in Burlington.
Thank you for your service.
It's an honor. Yeah. And in addition to that, I'm a minister at New Alpha Missionary Baptist Church, which is the only church that worships in the tradition of African Americans in the state. About 36 years running in Burlington, so I'm very proud of that as well. I don't have any testimony for you today, except for to say that one of the things that I do is, in addition to the Racial Justice Alliance being a member of the Cannabis Equity Coalition, we are also a member of the Land Access Opportunity Board. So I'm really here as a bridge, and in the interest of time, I would like to cede my time to the Land Access Opportunity Board. I'd love the opportunity to come back and tell you more about some of the things that we are doing, but in the interest of time and mostly respect to your time, I'm just going to cede my testimony today.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We'll have you back.
Hello. Good morning. Have some pass outs for you all.
Sure.
Thank you.
For the record.
Go ahead. Please just state your name and
Yeah.
let her rip, because you're gonna get short on time. So do the best you can do to get out with what you'd like to get out.
Wonderful. My name is Ornella Mata Figueroa. I'm Director of Advocacy and Community Engagement for the Land Access and Opportunity Board.
My name is Jane Hamilton. I'm the Director of Program Development.
Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
I don't see you can see in your
thank you.
handouts.
There you go.
Perfect. We start everywhere we go with these touchstones. And this is just like a glimpse into our value system. We listen generously. We speak our truth from our heart and mind. We make the work that we work. Take two. We make the way that we work together an example of what is possible. And we trust that we all hold a piece of the puzzle and that we need each other's pieces to understand the whole picture. So with that, I'd like to tell us a little bit about us. We were created at first in 1922 as an independent state board to address the disparities in land and home ownership in Vermont for people and groups that have been historically marginalized from land and home ownership. So who are the people that have been historically marginalized from land and home ownership? All poor and low income Vermonters, Vermonters with developmental disabilities, LGBTQIA Vermonters, immigrant people new to Vermont, and Vermonters who are people of color. Specifically, the LAOB was created to improve access and grow ideas and build on the existing systems to address prevalent wealth disparities by creating new opportunities for those who are most marginalized. And we believe foundationally that when those who are most marginalized, such as the small cultivators in the cannabis sector, do well, then we all do better.
Thanks, Ornella. I know we're really short on time, so our primary ask to you is that you invite us back in so we can tell you all about the LAOB. But if you look to the slide that says LAOB appointing authorities, you'll get a sense of who is appointed to our board. These are community-based organizations that represent all of those communities that Ornella just described. And what is really interesting about our board is that we work at the intersections of many different communities whose ability to access housing and land has been disadvantaged due to state policies and programs. We work together, understanding that when we work together across difference, we're able to come up better solutions that solve these problems that really become society-wide problems for us all. The priority objectives slide, I will go just really briefly. Basically we have different abilities enacted to us by our enabling statute. This includes advisory powers where we can advise into state policies and programs to improve the ability for all people to access land and home ownership. We are able to innovate and encourage our communities to innovate. We're able to direct resources directly into our communities and into the hands of Vermonters through grant making and other direct benefits. And then I think it's the last slide you have is a proposal for our FY26 budget. This is in large part funded by part of the CCB report that we heard today. That includes a recommendation for 25% of the cannabis excise tax to be allocated to the LAOB for community reinvestment activities. Of course, you've heard so much information today and you didn't get to hear much about that. So hopefully we can talk more about that, but there is a sort of basic foundation of community reinvestment that needs to occur for the cannabis marketplace to achieve its social equity priority. And the LAOB is a really unique state instrument that is well established and prepared to take these investments and put them directly into the hands of Vermonters in the form of down payment assistance grants for land and housing, funds to incentivize community-led development of housing. We have a lot of community interest in thinking about farm viability by connecting affordable housing to farmland so that all of our affordable housing does not need to be clustered into urban areas, but can actually also serve rural communities who want to farm as well. So we have a lot of great ideas and we look forward and hope that you'll invite us back so we can tell you more about them.
We'll invite you back.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. One more minute, one last pitch about anything?
Questions?
Okay. I think as a thing of time, we're gonna hold our questions because we have some Senate floor we need to get to. I wanna thank everybody for coming in today. I hope that everybody felt like they got heard. I know we got short on time at the end of the day, but doesn't mean that we don't have a vested interest as far as everything that you have. I think that you can see that this committee is very interested in making sure that we're fair with everyone and that